What are pet peeves? They're nothing to do with dogs, cats, or other domesticated animals. A pet peeve is something that a particular person finds especially annoying. And we have a whole podcast full of them. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Valencia. We are recording the podcast in Reza's flat. Reza is hosting the podcast today. And how are you?
I'm fine. I'm glad to be hosting the recording of the podcast here. The only downside about that is that the food isn't, or indeed there's no food because I haven't prepared any. When I podcast at Craig's flat, I always get a really nice meal.
Do you have any biscuits?
I do have the biscuits. I've got a selection of biscuits because you and I do like a nice bicky, I know.
We like a biscuit with our tea, so I'm happy about that. What's first this week?
Let's get cracking with a voice message from Javi from Madrid.
Hi Reza, hi Craig. My name is Javi and I'm sending this voice message from Madrid. First of all, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing for us to improve our English. This means a lot to us. I'm currently doing exercises from La Mansión del Inglés during the day and listening to your podcast at night. And it's very useful. If I pass my C1 English exam, it will be partly because of both of you. The topic I would like you to talk about is the recent difficulties you can find when looking for accommodation to live in Dublin. Last summer, I was offered a job there and I had to refuse it because it was impossible for me to find a decent place with an affordable price. Again, thank you mates for the amazing work you do for us. Cheers.
Well, thank you, Javi. It was an absolute pleasure to listen to your message. Well done for remembering the to after listen. Fantastic. Everything about your message I absolutely loved. The pronunciation, the selection of vocabulary, the verb tenses, very, very well controlled. You said all the work you've been doing. Well done. Present perfect continuous. And it will be partly because, nice use of the future there. So really, really good level of English, Javi. And in my opinion, I think, yeah, definitely C1 for speaking. What do you think?
Yes, at least I think you might even do well in a C2 speaking exam. We can't speak of your reading, writing and listening, but hey, you're speaking really good, Javi. I agree with Craig that was a fantastic recording and you're easily a C1 if not C2 level. But I can always find something. I can always be a party pooper, agua fiestas. You did say accommodation with an affordable price, but it should be at an affordable price. But hey, I'm being really, really, really over the top there, trying to find a mistake. No, it's not that heavy. I just want to help you. I want you to be perfect because I can see you're probably a perfectionist.
I hope you never focus on my English, Reza, because I'm sure you'd find a mistake in the way I speak. You always find something. You said, Javi, I had to refuse it. Yes, fantastic. Completely correct. You can also use a phrasal verb, which is to turn something down. If you turn the job down or turn it down, that means the same as to refuse. And cheers in Irish is sláinte?
Sláinte.
Sláinte. So if you do go to Dublin, you might need that word, sláinte. When you're drinking and you touch glasses, it means cheers.
And as for your query, Yes, I come from Ireland myself, but from Belfast. And I can tell you that Belfast is much, much, much cheaper than Dublin for accommodation. In fact, Dublin's one of the dearest cities, I think, in Europe when it comes to accommodation. So I'm not going to lie to you. You're not going to find a decent place cheap in Dublin. You're going to have to pay for it. But here's what I suggest. Live as far away from the centre as you can. That's still comfortable, that you can still commute, but it's not making your life difficult. But make sure, if you can, to get somewhere on the DART line, the D-A-R-T, DART.
Is that the subway?
That's not a subway, no, it's an overground train, but it connects up the city very well. The Dublin Area Rapid Transport System. If you can get somewhere near a DART station, that is a good idea, because if you have to rely on a bus, they're going to be slow into Dublin. But you know what? Again, I've got to be a party pooper. I imagine that people are well aware of this. And if the place is near a DART station, I imagine the price might go up. But I may be wrong. I hope you get lucky, Javi.
And you said you turned it down, so perhaps you're looking for a job in a different city, a different place. But for people who do find themselves in a similar situation, as Reza said, you can rent a place that's cheaper outside of the city centre and commute inside, travel into work. You could consider sharing accommodation to reduce the cost of the rent. And one thing that occurred to me, I don't know if it's possible in Dublin, but in some cities you can buy a second-hand camper van and live on a campsite and travel into work temporarily, but until you start earning money and you can afford your own place. So that's something that not many people think about. Obviously not in a tent, but some of these RVs, recreational vehicles, camper vans, you could rent one or buy one second-hand, an old one, and just use that on a campsite. It's cheap to pay to sleep on a campsite. You've got water, you've got electricity. That could be a solution. And if anyone is interested, we do have some podcasts that may help people in Javi's situation. We recorded a podcast on renting a place to live. That's episode 438. Working abroad, episode 303. And living abroad, 291. And we did an episode about Ireland in general. That was episode 300. So links to all of those podcasts are on the website at inglespodcast.com.
Whatever you decide to do, Javi, good luck, but don't let it stress you out. We know it's stressful, but I'm sure you'll find a solution in the end.
So let's get to the main topic of today's podcast, and that is pet peeves. What are pet peeves, Reza?
So, as we said in the introduction, it's nothing to do with animals. The word pet here is being used as an adjective. A pet peeve is a peeve which means a lot to you personally. That's the word pet there. It's very personal to you. But now you're thinking, okay, what's a peeve then? Okay, P-E-E-V-E, a peeve, or it can be the verb to peeve. If something peeves you, it irritates you. So a pet peeve is something that irritates you personally in a particular way, although it might not irritate everybody. It's your pet peeve.
And there are some expressions you can use to express your irritation, your annoyance at things in life that bother you. And you can use the word bother in one of the expressions. You can say, it really bothers me. Obviously, we have an S there because it's third person. It really bothers me, or it really annoys me. Another expression you can use, I can't stand it. I can't stand it when blah, blah, blah. Can you think of any more, Reza?
Yeah, a few more, because I do like talking about my pet peeves. You can say, it gets on my nerves. Or a very similar one, it drives me mad. We don't mean mad here in the sense of insane. We mean mad as in angry. It drives me mad. Or it drives me up the wall.
There's an animal that's associated with expressing your irritation, and that's a goat. Goat. You can say, it gets on my goat, or it gets my goat when this happens. And more colloquially, you could say, it does my head in. That's more colloquial English, and I think it's also typically British, isn't it, Reza? It does my head in.
Yes, I don't think North Americans would use that much. There's one more I can think of, Craig. Should I say it? It's a little bit vulgar. It pisses me off. Now, we're not talking about urine here. The verb to piss off, the phrasal verb, means to irritate. So if something pisses you off, it annoys you. So you can use that to describe a pet peeve.
But be careful, because if a British person says I'm pissed, that means they're drunk. They've had too much alcohol. If an American speaker says I'm pissed, that means they're annoyed, they're mad, they're frustrated, or they're angry. I'm really pissed, man. So let's go to Reza first. Tell us one of your pet peeves. What do you hate? What drives you mad? What gets your goat?
Well, because I'm a grumpy guy, I guess I better narrow it down.
What does grumpy mean?
Grumpy means I like to groan, grumble, complain about things. I'm grumpy, grugnon. So I'll limit it to some of my pet peeves, but if Craig let me, I could talk for hours about them, but I better not. The first one might surprise you. That's why I'm going to mention it first. Fitting rooms. Now, what do I mean? I mean changing rooms. Places in shops, clothes shops, where you go to try on. That means try for the first time, something new. You try on the new clothes there.
Why would that bother you?
I think it's a very good idea to have fitting rooms. I don't like the idea of having to buy clothes without trying them on, which is why I never buy clothes online, ever. So what's my problem with fitting rooms? Well, the fact that they're all crap. They're all
dirty
horrible.
or small?
They're dirty as a rule. They're too small as a rule. They're too hot. They're too stuffy. They're just horrible places. Have you ever been in a nice fitting room except in a really, really fancy shop? And even those shops can have bad fitting rooms.
I've never noticed, because I think I'm in a fitting room for the maximum of 3 or 4 minutes. It's really quick, and I don't expect luxury. I don't expect a comfortable chair, but yeah, some of them can be a bit dirty, but it's not something that bothers me. That's really weird. Okay, well,
that's the name of the game. That's why I wanted to say it first, because it's my pet peeve. Exactly, that's the point.
It's personal to you.
It's personal to me, but a lot of people would go, "What's your problem? There's no big deal about a fitting room." You see, that's the essence of a pet peeve. That it's particular to you, but other people might just not understand what your problem is.
Well, I think my first one might be quite a common pet peeve. I think many people would find this annoying, and that's dog owners who don't pick up after their pets. So I'm talking about owners whose dog leaves a mess on the pavement.
What you mean, like they don't tidy up their things? What do you mean they leave a mess? Can you be more specific?
Yes, I can. They sit on the pavement and it's left there. They don't clean it up, and then you're walking along, speaking to somebody, not paying attention where you're walking, and splat, your foot is in it. Now, some people say this is good luck, like a bird shitting on you. I don't see how that is good luck, and it's just irresponsible to me. I think that if you have a dog, it's your dog, it's your shit, it's your problem. You should pick it up, and I know that you always used to. So I respect that, and I respect anybody who takes their mess or their dog's mess, which is their mess, home with them and throw it away.
Yes, as Craig says, I used to whenever I had a dog, and it really irritated me to see people who didn't do it. I totally agree with Craig. Unacceptable. And I say it as a former dog owner. My next one, I bet, is a common one. In fact, by chance, I've had to do it this week, and I'll be doing it later today. Yes, let me explain. Calling internet or mobile phone providers. Who are they? Well, for example, Vodafone, Virgin, Telefonica, people like that. I hate dealing with them. For example, totally true. Monday this week, I phoned them to get my account changed because they just started charging me lots more money for no good reason, other than a year had finished, and if you don't say otherwise, they start charging you more. So they started charging me more. I got in touch, and after an hour on the phone, they eventually said, yeah, okay, right, yeah, technical things. And then after about an hour and 10 minutes, he said, yeah, we can't do it today, but we will do it. We will change the account. I tell you what, we'll call you back and speak on Friday, sometime around about 3:30. No, why they couldn't just do it then, I don't know. And this was Monday. Why wait to Friday? I do not know. But do they think I have all day to waste? I already give them an hour and 10 minutes of my time. I've been a customer of theirs for about 10 years. They said, yes, they could do it. They could change my conditions. Do I really need to speak for an hour and 10 minutes one day and then again another day to get it done? I don't see the problem. Do you see why they bother me?
Yeah, I understand totally. But for me, it's not only mobile phone companies. It's any company that has really bad customer service, companies that have recorded messages instead of an actual person to talk to. And it's very, very frustrating. And maybe it's because I'm getting older, but I don't remember years ago it was this bad. I think it's just getting gradually worse as companies try to save more money. And it's something that we have to live with because they're not getting any better. Banks, any corporation that's trying to save money will give poorer customer service.
I think they're really cynical. I think cynicism, that's the noun behind the adjective cynical in Spanish, right? So I think they basically think all the big companies, yeah, we're all terrible at it. So therefore it doesn't make a difference. They have to come to one of us. So people don't even take this terrible customer service into account. I am absolutely convinced there's nothing more complicated than that to it, because effectively, Vodafone, Virgin, Telephone, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. They know that you know that. So, hey, don't like it? You think you're going to get better customer service than the other? You know you won't. So price is the only thing. So, let's stop pretending. Isn't it that?
Yeah, it could be. If anyone's listening who works for one of these companies, are we wrong? Do you think we're being unfair? Please let us know. We'll give you details at the end of this podcast how you can contact us. We'd love to hear from you if you disagree with us and you think we are being unfair to these mobile phone companies and internet providers. My next pet peeve is kind of connected to yours in a way because it's other people's expectations. Now, you mentioned that the customer service representative wanted to phone you back at another time that was convenient for them after keeping you on the phone for over an hour. So that's not considering what your life is, and it's their expectation that you would have the time available to connect with them. So any people who expect an immediate answer to emails, for example, anybody who would expect you to go to an office when maybe you can solve the problem using email, anyone who imposes their expectations on you, that really annoys me. That really bothers me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In fact, I've just suffered an example of that recently. From work, I got an email saying, a teacher got in touch with you about doing an exchange thing with between their class and yours, sending information. Can you do it now, like this week? Get it finished now. This is for Valencia, the few days before the Fallas holiday. Why? Because that teacher, their term finishes in a couple of days. But mine doesn't. And I got a holiday next week,
Yeah. Exactly. They're imposing their agenda on you without considering if you have a similar schedule, a similar problem. They're just assuming that their problem is automatically yours. And that's not the case.
My next one, I think you might share with me if I recall. I'm not sure. Public toilets with no soap or no way to dry your hands.
Oh, yes, that's a typical pet peeve of mine.
I mean, it's basic hygiene. You need soap and you need somewhere to dry your hands. I hate my hands dripping all over the place. And then with my wet hands, I have to grab some dirty doorknob to open the door. It's a very unpleasant experience. I just don't like it. And I'm sure we got listeners who agree with that.
Yeah, and what does my head in is when they don't put a rubbish bin next to the door, even if there is soap and a paper towel. So you do what you have to do in the bathroom, in the toilet, you wash your hands, you dry your hands. And it's so easy to open the door and then throw the paper into the rubbish bin next to the door. But if the rubbish bin is on the other side of the toilet, you have to walk over, throw away the paper towel, walk back to the door, touch the handle of the door to open it, and you know somebody before you has touched that handle without washing their hands. So now you have what they've done on your hands. Am I being too hygienic here?
I share that concern. I guess that's because Craig and I are kind of clean freaks. We love the idea of hygiene, but I've always said that to Craig that I share that concern. I don't want to touch dirty doorknobs, so I prefer to have a towel to use that to touch the doorknob with.
And then throw it away.
Yeah. Or avoid doors that need to be touched by your hands, kind of a sliding door or some kind of system whereby you don't have to dirty your hands.
Let me paint a verbal picture for you. You go to your local cafe to have breakfast. You order a coffee, some toast, and an orange juice. What really annoys me is when they bring the coffee and then the toast, and then 5 or 10 minutes later, they bring the orange juice. And I know you agree with me because we've spoken about this. How annoying is that? You want your orange juice first. If you work in a cafe, please take note. Serve the orange juice first, and then serve the coffee and the toast.
And I'm sorry if there's a listener who's about to be offended here, but if you are the type of person who prefers to drink a coffee, then orange juice after that, you just don't know anything about anything. Sorry. Because nobody does. It doesn't make any sense. After the taste of coffee to drink orange, it's absurd. So if you think that orange after coffee is all right, you have no sense of taste whatsoever. Sorry to tell you that.
Before we continue, Rez, I hope you realise that so far on this podcast, in only 23 minutes, we've lost listeners who are dog owners, who work in a cafe, and who work for mobile phone companies. So let's see who else we can cross off the list.
Not to mention people who love having the taste of orange juice in their mouth all day.
What's your next one?
The next one for me is, it's a quickie. This won't take long. Straight to the point. Pasta served on a cold plate. Pasta can be cold if it's supposed to be cold. If it's pasta salad, all right, yeah, you want it cold, don't want it too warm. But hot pasta, everybody knows that in a quarter of a millisecond, pasta goes cold. So don't serve it on a cold plate. At least make the plate hot so that it's not instantly cold. I've been in Valencia, even in the summer, and been served pasta. It's been 38 degrees, but within 2 minutes, the pasta is cold. It's just the nature of pasta. So can you imagine doing that in a restaurant in Ireland or Alaska? The plate needs to be hot for pasta.
But do you think that's a British thing? Because in my experience, British people tend to prefer the food hotter than Spanish people. My wife, for example, it doesn't bother her to have a meal that's just a little warm and not very hot, but I like my food hot. Maybe it's a cultural thing.
I think it could be very much a British thing. It often goes for coffee and tea as well. Many Brits don't like getting lukewarm. That means not exactly warm, not exactly cold coffee. If they say hot, they want it hot. Yeah.
While we're on the subject of Italian food, is there anything else that gets your goat when we think about Italian food?
Yes. I like a good pizza if it's a good one, but I don't like it undercooked. I like it cooked properly. Let me be very specific. Floppy pizzas. Have you ever seen a self-respecting Italian ask for or want a floppy pizza.
Floppy, you mean it moves around a lot? It's not crisp?
The opposite of rigid. If something is not rigid, so you lift it up and it goes, it bends, that's floppy. Floppy. Pizza is not supposed to be floppy. I'm not saying it has to be really hard. It doesn't have to be hard, but absolutely, definitely not floppy. Apart from it being a texture that I don't like, it generally means that it's undercooked and that it'll be really heavy then. Because it hasn't been cooked enough, it's like everything's kind of semi-liquid. It's just a big kind of blob which goes into your stomach. Don't you find that?
Yeah, and we had a shared experience recently eating in an Italian restaurant where they served a disgusting pizza, and you actually sent it back to the kitchen. And you don't do that very often, so it must have been really undercooked if you sent it back to the kitchen.
I remember that, and it came back still undercooked, but slightly less undercooked. I couldn't believe it, but I was too embarrassed to say a second time, cook it again. I didn't want to be that fussy. Fussy is tickys-mickeys. You know, I thought one complaint is enough. I won't complain again.
My next pet peeve is being in a lift, or if you're American, in an elevator, and you're in a confined space. So there isn't a lot of space, but there are a lot of people, and someone is coughing and sneezing without covering their mouth. And I've become especially sensitive to this since COVID. It did bother me as well, BC, like before COVID, but it really bothers me now. If I'm in a small space, like a crowded bus, and someone's coughing all over me, that really, really annoys me.
Yeah, I'm the same. And particularly lifts, the same as you. In fact, I have to admit that even now, April 2023, even though it's not obligatory, I sometimes put a face mask on to get into a lift, which is going to be really crowded.
Me too. Do you wear a face mask on a bus? Because it's not obligatory anymore in Spain.
Funny you should say that. 90% of the time, no. But again, if it's really, really crowded and there are lots of people coughing and stuff, I sometimes put it on.
Yeah, I wore one this morning coming here to your flat. The bus was really crowded because it's near the Fallas festival in Valencia, so everybody is traveling around, and the bus was packed. If a place is packed, it's crowded, it's full of people. So I wore my mask for the whole journey.
But would you have worn the mask if the bus was more or less empty?
Probably not.
Yeah,
but it's always in my pocket just in case.
I'm the same as you, exactly the same. Let's move to another area of life, the roads. Something that peeves me, something that does my head in, and I think above all for legal reasons, I have every right to be annoyed. Motorists, and a motorist could be a car driver or a motorcyclist. The word motorist in English includes everybody driving a vehicle with a motor, an engine. Motorists who go right past you in the middle of a zebra crossing when you, the pedestrian, have the right of way. There's nobody alive who doesn't know that that's illegal. And if you come up with some story, I say, just shut up. You know it's not legal. Don't do it. You've no excuse. Yet people do it. It's like, no, but the law's not clear. But I was kind of there already, so I can't break. Rubbish. You have to stop, and you know it. If you're one of those people who does it, stop doing it. It annoys me no end.
I can tell that it really gets on your nerves.
Well, it's a question of health. I mean, they could collide with me. They could cause damage to my body. I mean, for someone to not take that into account is such a lack of respect.
Does it happen often to you here in your area?
Of course, we're in Valencia. Let's be honest. you know that it happens a lot in Valencia, doesn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, it does. You're right. It happens more than it should. Yeah, I agree.
It happens everywhere. I've seen it happen in the UK and other places, but I have to be honest, in Europe, Spain's one of the places where it tends to happen quite a lot, particularly certain parts of Spain. Valencia is one of those.
One thing that really gets on my nerves is being interrupted while I'm speaking and someone talks over me as I'm trying.
Oh, sorry, Craig. Can I just say...
Yes, Reza.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's exactly what I mean. If I'm trying to get my point across and say something that I think is important. Maybe the other person doesn't think so. But if I'm trying to explain something or say something that I think is important and somebody interrupts me and talks over me, that really, really bothers me. And I don't know if you agree, but it tends to happen more when I'm speaking Spanish than when I'm speaking English. I think English speakers, native English speakers, tend to have more awareness of turn taking, and they tend to look at body language and notice before they jump in and start speaking, depending obviously on the relationship that you have with the person. But generally speaking, do you think that's true?
I do. And that's not to say that Spanish people, or Spanish speakers, I should say, are rude and polite. No, it's just a cultural thing.
Yeah, it's cultural.
More accepted in when you're speaking Spanish to be more assertive about giving your opinion, and you just have to get used to that idea.
What do you do? Do you
Spanish.
shout? Do you speak louder? Or you just stop speaking and let them speak?
I do the same as them. So if they speak louder, I probably turn up the volume a bit. But if they stop whenever two people are speaking, I'll do the same. I tend to react the same way as the other person. What else can you do?
Yeah, that's what I do too. What's your next one, Reza?
The next one for me is not the end of the world, true, but it is irritating when there's not enough serviettes or napkins, if you prefer, for what you're eating. Or if they're too flimsy. Let me explain this word flimsy. It's an adjective. Flimsy, not good enough for the job, not hard enough, not strong enough. It just isn't going to be good enough. So you know how, for example, you've gone out in Spain for that mariscada, this seafood platter. You've got your prawns, you've got your scallops, your fish, loads of things. You're going to get your hands dirty. Oysters, all that type of thing. What do you get? A tiny 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter, paper thin, made out of paper, one serviette. What good is that going to do me? I'm going to eat a dozen prawns, 6 oysters, dip my hands in all sorts of sauces. How on earth could that be of any use to anybody?
I do get the feeling that some of these pet peeves are very first world pet peeves. I think if you think about it, with all the problems there are in the world, I think maybe we're exaggerating some of these problems that we're having. But anyway, pet peeves. Yeah, I agree. That is annoying when you have to try and clean your hand on a very small serviette. Always being late is my next pet peeve. Now, let me be clear. If I'm in my flat and Reza's coming to record a podcast and he arrives late, it doesn't bother me because I'm in my home, I'm probably working or doing something, so that doesn't bother me at all. But if I've agreed to meet somebody, I don't know, outside a bank or a restaurant or even in a cafe or outside the cinema, things happen in life. And these days with WhatsApp or other messaging services, you can say, oh, I'm sorry, the bus is late. I'm going to be 10 minutes late. That's fine. But if the same person continually, every time, is 15, 20 minutes late, I think that is not respecting my time. And that annoys me. That bothers me. So people speak about English punctuality, etc., but I don't think it's so much a cultural thing. I just think it's respecting people's time, and being on time when you should be on time, I think, is important. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. And I admit I'm often slightly late when I go to meet Craig, for example. But I'm not sure if you'd agree, but the way I say it is, for me, there's a big difference of adverbs. I'm often late, but I'm not always late. Not 100% of the time, but a high percentage, I'll grant you that.
But not when we're meeting outside somewhere.
Yeah.
You're usually on time when we're meeting outside somewhere. And as I said, it doesn't matter if I've invited you over for coffee or if we're podcasting, but it's when you arrange to meet somebody outside somewhere and you're just waiting in the street for somebody to arrive because they haven't left their home in time.
Yes. Craig and I have a few mutual friends that we could name, but we probably shouldn't to protect our interests.
Let's not name and shame on the podcast, but you know who you are.
You know who you are, yeah.
Jonathan.
I have a few friends, more than one, and to be honest, for certain things, I lie to them about the time. There are certain people who, if I meet, for example, to go to the cinema, although I haven't been in a while, and the film starts at 8, I'm going to tell them 7:30. And they'll arrive about 10 to 8.
Do you have any more pet peeves on your list, Reza?
I do. I know we agree on the next one. We don't like people jumping the queue, or as Americans would say, cutting in line. Of course we don't. We're British. It's in our genes. 99% of British people, at least, I would say, if not 100, object to someone jumping the queue. Colarse in Spanish. We do not like it. I know there's plenty of Spanish people who don't like it as well, but there seem to be some Spanish people who don't have a problem with it. Be very careful if you go to the UK. Don't just casually ignore the order of a queue. It could land you in big trouble, couldn't it, Craig?
Yes, you could get a punch on the nose in some areas of London if you jump the queue and you don't go to the end. So be careful about that. My next one, there is no one to blame for this except myself. And this is when I'm not able to sleep, when I have to get up early. That really annoys me. Now, usually I work at home, so I don't really have to worry about not being able to get to sleep. But if I do have an early appointment in the morning and I go to bed early to get enough sleep, and I'm thinking, well, if I go to sleep now, then I can have like 7 hours sleep or something. That's and I'm laying there and I'm turning in my bed and I worry more and the stress builds and I can't get to sleep. And I don't like taking sleeping pills or anything like that, so I do try to get to sleep by myself. But sometimes if there's an important meeting the next day or something's happening and I need to get up early, maybe there's a plane to catch and I just can't get to sleep and it turns around in my head. That really annoys me.
My next one is people giving directions when they themselves actually don't know how to get there. I don't know why they do it.
Does that happen?
Not very often, thankfully, but from time to time, I've said to people, yeah, I'm looking for such and such a bank. It's like, oh, yeah, hold on. Yeah, I think I know where it is. I think it's down that street, blah, blah. And then they say, oh, no, hold on. It's this street. Yeah, it's definitely this street. Turn left, right, blah, blah, blah. And you go there, and it's nowhere near there. They just made it up because they heard that it might be there, or 20 years ago they once walked past it, or they just didn't want to say, no, I don't know. There seem to be people who just can't say, you know what? I don't know. They have to tell you something. Why? I don't get it.
I can understand how that would be annoying. I always say, no, I'm not from around here. No, I don't live in this area. I can't help you. I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be really, really annoying. My last one is something that I'm not going to speak about a lot because I think maybe it's a good topic for a future podcast, and that's wokeism. Now, if you are woke, W-O-K-E, when I was a few years younger, it was called being politically correct, which means being aware of people's feelings and not offending them or insulting them. And I've just got the feeling that I'm not, I hope I'm not, although maybe you or the listeners can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think I'm racist or sexist. I hope I'm not. So what I'm feeling now is that I have to tiptoe around my words. If you tiptoe, then you walk on your toes. You're very careful, you're very quiet, you're very nervous about walking or doing or saying something in this case, so that you don't offend somebody. And of course, I don't want to offend anybody, but I just think there's this general movement in society, especially by the extreme liberal left, that is affecting what we can say and what we can't say, and in a way censoring our language. Now, I don't want to go any further than that because I think it's a good thing to think about and discuss in the future. But Do you feel that, Reza, or am I on my own here?
No, I think you're in good company. That means there are plenty of people. I think it is important to be sensitive to certain issues, but I agree with Craig that some people are perhaps oversensitive. And it's as if there were some people nowadays who are just waiting to be offended. They want an excuse to be offended when they probably know that you haven't really meant to offend them, but they just decided to use an excuse to say, oh, you've offended me. I find that there are a few people a bit like that nowadays, and people who are too woke, people who are too politically correct and sensitive. Have you noticed that they tend not to have a great sense of humor?
I haven't noticed that. No.
Because, humor will inevitably involve some kind of cliche or stereotype. That's often how humor works, isn't it? So the type of person who's not prepared to, contemplate any kind of stereotyping, even if it's obviously absurd, that I find that a bit irritating, yeah.
But I know a lot of comedians are being censored now and being cancelled, and cancel culture does also connect to this. So maybe we'll put a pin in it. That expression, to put a pin in something, is to make a note, to notice it, and to leave it for another podcast, because I think there's a lot to discuss there. And if you have an opinion on that, then please send us a voice message, let us know, and we will include your message in that future podcast. Do you have any more?
I've got one more, and since we may well have offended many...
Half the population, half the listeners of this podcast.
Why not see if I can offend politicians and people like that? The expression going forward. Yep, that expression, going forward. For me, it's utterly meaningless. It's superfluous. It serves no purpose. So the government says, for example, a government spokesman says, so we're going to be increasing the number of jobs next year going forward. Yeah, obviously, going forward. You said next year. It's not going backwards, is it? Or stay in the same place? What does the words going forward add? You said you're going to do this next year. Got it. Going forward. Yeah, I know it's forward. You said next year. Does it serve any purpose saying going forward? It has no purpose. As if you can conceive of a future plan which involves going backwards.
So to be clear, you're talking about this expression going forward when it's used in a political way, in a formal way, by a spokesperson, by somebody in the media, not necessarily a person who's just saying, oh, I'm going forward with my English studies.
For example, yeah, exactly. When it's added as an extra thing, an add-on, which is unnecessary. Obviously, if you say to you, oh, I'm in my car, I'm having trouble going forward because the gears aren't working.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you've got to say that then. I'm talking about people who add it as an unnecessary thing to say, like, oh, look, aren't we being really positive? We're going forward. We don't go backwards. We're going forward. Yeah, I got that with your use of the going to. I'm familiar with the idea that going to or we will or something like that refers to future plans. So why do you need to add the word going forward as if to say, look, we go forward. People who don't agree with us, oh, they go backwards or something silly like that. No.
Yeah, that is annoying. I have a similar one used in similar media situations, and that's on the ground. For example, you might hear a news presenter say, the situation with the strikers, with the labour unions and the strikes is very bad on the ground. What you mean, like they're not in the air, they are actually on the ground. And I hear that a lot, and that really gets my goat. That really annoys me. By the way, next week we'll be talking about colloquial expressions. So if you want to learn some more useful expressions that are more useful than going forward and on the ground, listen to next week's podcast.
Craig, if people are interested in this whole idea of pet peeves, are you familiar with Room 101?
Yes, that's a very popular TV show. You can find many past episodes on YouTube. Go to YouTube and search for Room, ROOM 101, 101. And 3 guests come on the show and they talk about their pet peeves. And the host of the show decides which pet peeve goes into room 101. And it's very similar to our pet peeves in this podcast, so that will be good listening practice for you. I'll put a link in the show notes at inglespodcast.com.
So listeners, now it's your turn to practice. What are your pet peeves? What's your number one pet peeve? Why don't you send us a voice message and tell us? You can record your voice and leave it at speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. Or I guess, Craig, they could write if they wanted, although we prefer an audio message. How can they get us by email?
You can contact me. My email address is Craig, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, especially if you're interested in improving your fluency in your speaking, because I get together on Zoom with a small group of motivated students, and together we practice speaking, fluency, pronunciation, and vocabulary. If you're interested in a course like that and you'd like to improve your speaking, send me an email. If you want to reach Reza, his email address is belfastreza, that's Reza, at gmail.com. We also remind you that this podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. You can visit the online store and look at the courses we have for sale. Go to store.mansioningles.net.
And to end the podcast, as always, we'd like to say a big thank you to all of you who help us by supporting the podcast on the Patreon scheme. That's Patreon, Patreon. And what those people do is donate as little as $1.50 a month. And as a thank you for them doing that, we give those people instant access to audio transcriptions. So if you're interested, why not follow the link in the show notes? It's patreon.com/inglespodcast.
And we don't have time, unfortunately, to thank all of you individually who are sponsoring us on Patreon, but we would like to welcome and say thank you to our most recent supporters, and they are Jaume Ferrer Muñoz, Luz Viviana Moreno, Carlos, Maria Madariaga, Pedro Carrillo, Susana, Francisco Otero, and Angel Kessel. Thank you to you and to everybody who is supporting us on Patreon.
Craig, what have we got in next week's episode?
As I mentioned, next week we've got 8 common colloquial expressions, part 11. So look forward to seeing you next week for that. Until then, have a wonderful week. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts, and the track is called See You Later.